Thank you all so much. I'll go ahead and share the screen so you can see my little presentation, and then we will get going. It is an honor and a privilege to be among y'all this morning. Thank you so much for inviting me. What I basically plan on doing is just sharing a little bit about what we've been doing down at Reinhardt for the last almost year, about 9 months, in a project called the Cherokee Voices Project. As you'll see, and as the kind of the image here on your screen would lead you to believe, it has to do with the claims against the U.S. government that were filed numerous occasions, but especially in the largest kind of batches in 1838 prior to removal, and in 1842 after arrival in the West. So I'll get started by talking about the background of the project and the questions that we were searching for, looking to answer. So the background: Reinhardt University has a museum on campus called the Funk Heritage Center. And the executive director of the Funk Heritage Center is this man on your screen, your friend and mine, Jeff Bishop. Jeff, during COVID-19, the Funk Heritage Center obviously lost a lot of financial kind of wherewithal due to the fact that tours and school groups couldn't come during lockdown. And they were looking for ways to utilize the resources they had in the museum, in the library, to get grant money, to get projects going that could use what we had on hand. One of the things we had on hand, of course, were the claims, some access to the 38 claims via the Trail of Tears Association website, and the paper claims, the hard copy claims that were done so expansively and so expertly way back when by our very own Mary Bell Chase. So using those resources, Jeff thought he could apply for a grant from the National Endowment for the Humanities. And the specific grant was called the Sustaining Humanities Initiative Project, or the SHIP. So that's the grant that Jeff applied for. And lo and behold, the National Endowment for the Humanities said, this sounds like a really important project, a way to bring new attention to the experiences of Cherokee people living in the state of Georgia and the Cherokee Nation during the 1820s, 30s, and 40s, and a way for us to expand our knowledge of local history, especially seeing that Waleska, Georgia, is situated in the Hickory Log District of the Eastern Nation. So having been given the grant, Jeff was able to hire me as the postdoctoral historian for a year-long project. And then also we were able to hire 3 undergraduate research interns. And their names are Camille McKinney, Sydney Murray, and Christopher Walker. And these 3 interns are all upperclassmen at Reinhardt, and 2 out of 3 are history majors. 1 is an interdisciplinary studies major. And their work on this project was really, really great. They had a good experience, and I'm going to share a little bit more about that in a little bit. The other piece of the puzzle, of course, is our very own Mike Wren. I couldn't have done it. We couldn't have done it without Mike's support. Mike was always willing to meet for lunch or meet over a phone call to explain, to help me locate the claims that I was looking for as JPEGs, and to kind of walk me through the project. So I want to make sure I make a special mention of the role that Mike played, albeit unofficial, invaluable for this project. So the questions we wanted to ask as we approach this project, looking at the Hickory Log District claims from 1838, 1842, I broke it down for this presentation into 3 categories: local connections, historical analysis and interpretation, and future usefulness. So in terms of local connections, the question is this: what can we learn about the Cherokee people who lived in the Hickory Log District of the Cherokee Nation East? As far as the second question, historical analysis and interpretation. What do the Hickory Log claims tell us about how the citizens of the Cherokee Nation experienced the removal era, going all the way back into the 1820s as they began to be infringed upon, attacked, by white citizens, members of the Pony Club, and other vigilantes who began to dispossess them of their improvements and of their land. The third question is future usefulness. How might the information in the claims be useful both to scholars of Cherokee history, Native American history writ large, but also descendants, to people who live in Oklahoma, who live in California, live wherever, whose ancestors were a part of the removal process and who may have hit a brick wall, that genealogical brick wall about who their ancestors were, what they lived like prior to removal. And these claims give detailed accounts of the way in which the people were living in the Cherokee Nation East, what they wore, what they ate, how they lived, how much property they owned, and these things, which are invaluable for people of Cherokee descent to learn more about their ancestors. So these are the kind of three categories we were using and analytically to approach the project. Moving on to the next slide, the work. So as you can see here on the top right, this is a map that is on the Trail Tiers Association website on the claims page, and it shows the breakdown of the Cherokee Nation electoral districts that we use and that the claims agents used to collect claims prior to removal. As most of us know, and as Mary Bell has given in a previous presentation at the Trail Tiers Association that I watched on YouTube and found very helpful, the districts in the east include Coosawattee, Etowah, Hickory Log, etc. But then once the claimants are in the west, they don't necessarily use those names. They do on occasion, but they tend to appeal based on where they ended up. So Flint District, Tahlequah, Going Snake, etc. So our 38 claims are going to be, as most of you all know, identified by Eastern District, and the 42 claims identified by Western District. So the work. The main bulk of the work, the hours and hours and hours that the interns and myself and Jeff and Mike put into this project primarily comprises of two things: transcription and digitization. Transcription, as most of you all, of course, know, means using the primary source images of the claims and then using Microsoft Word, another word processing system, to transcribe these, and then eventually to have the transcriptions digitized to go online alongside the original claims images as a way of making it easier for researchers and descendants to access the claims. So as far as the work goes, we finished about a month and a half ago transcribing all the Hickory Log claims from 1838. There were about 600 or so, maybe 650, including claims that didn't have direct Hickory Log identification, but did have a location we knew was in Hickory Log, like Sixes or Talking Rock. The 1842 Hickory Log claims are near completion. Right now, we're wrapping up this set of claims. I'm working on a set of claims right now from Going Snake Book 2, and the interns are working on some claims from the Delaware and the Flint District. As far as digitization goes, for the 38 claims, the digitization of our transcriptions is currently in process. We sent a massive kind of zip file of all the transcriptions broken down into individual documents to the folks in Oklahoma. I believe Darren Crawford is his name, who does the digitization for us. So that is in process, and eventually those claims will be able to be accessed, the transcriptions accessed alongside the claims on the Trail Tiers Association website. The 1842 claims digitization, this is forthcoming. This is kind of the last piece of the grant period that we're going to be focusing on, is making sure that our transcriptions of the 42 Hickory Log claims can be accessed online for the public and for descendants to use. And the other image, of course, you see here is a screenshot I took yesterday as I was putting this together of a claim of the well-known Cherokee minister and leader, Jesse Bushyhead. And this, of course, is filed over here on the left, you see in Going Snake District. So very relevant to y'all's purpose as an organization. So let's talk about the research outcomes. As you can see here on the right, these are our three interns. These are the all-stars of the project. I was kind of the man behind the curtain, kind of doing all the official stuff, but the interns were the ones who, for 10 hours a week, came into my office or worked from home and really were able to gain a new skill set. They learned paleography, how to read 19th century handwritten sources. It was a steep learning curve, but they showed up and they did an amazing job. Christopher is on the left, Camille is in the middle, and Sydney is on the right. So I'm really proud of their work. The research outcomes. One of the research outcomes what had to do with the people then and the people now. Like another way I've categorized the outcomes. In regards to the people then, one thing we learned about and were able to hopefully share about were the stories and the communities surrounding Reinhardt in the Hickory Log District. So places like Lost Town, Sixes, Talking Rock, Hickory Log Town, and Shoal Creek. All these places are within an easy driving distance, if not walking distance, from Reinhardt's campus. So it was a real kind of joy and a privilege to be able to help tell the story of the people who lived in the Cherokee Nation East during the era prior to removal, and learn about their stories, their heartaches, their hardships, but also their resilience, their families, their culture. Another thing in terms of research outcomes has to do with people now. The project actually about 2 weeks ago was featured in our local newspaper, the Cherokee Tribune and Ledger, an article entitled Reinhardt Project Reveals Stories of Cherokee People During Forced Removal Period. That was published on May 2nd, 2023. So the work we're doing in relation to the claims in Hickory Log, these stories have been able to reach a wider audience by attempting to talk to journalists, reporters, and again, make sure that people who live in current Cherokee County, Georgia, where Reinhardt is located, know more about the original inhabitants and the process of removal and the way in which the Georgia government and the federal government carried out that process. The research outcomes part 2, and the part that was more, I think, kind of deeply historical analytical, has to do with historical analysis and interpretation. So one thing I wanted to do was, as well as giving the interns an opportunity to read these sources, to do the transcriptions, I wanted to give them a chance as history majors, as history students, to really dig in and use the claims as primary sources to learn more about this period, this era, and these events. So what I did is I assigned each of them a kind of a topic. For Sydney Murray, I had her research the context of the removal from Hickory Log District. For Camille McKinney, I had her research Cherokee life, agriculture, aquaculture, the things we were learning in the claims about fish traps, corn bushels, all these things. She focused on that. Christopher Walker focused on the categories of dispossession, the various ways that we read in the claims in which Cherokee Nation citizens were deprived of their property, whether it was through a individual stealing a horse, whether it was through forced removal on May 23rd, 1838, whether it was through the Georgia Guard stealing a gold mine, things like this. For my own kind of personal kind of topic, I assigned myself historiographical and historical considerations. I wanted to look at the way in which these claims could actually benefit future scholars of the Cherokee Nation. Scholars who study the Pony Club, scholars who study gender and race in the Cherokee Nation. So that was the kind of assignment I gave myself. So using these 4 categories, we each, myself and the interns, for about 2 or 3 weeks, wrote papers, did a project, and then in February of this year, we got a grant from the Center for Student Learning on campus to go down to the Georgia Association of Historians annual conference in Valdosta, Georgia, and present our findings to a community of scholars and historians. It was a good experience for the students. Most of them have never had an opportunity to share any kind of original research in this kind of more professional context. They thrived. They did a great job. They enjoyed it. We had great conversations with other historians of the native South. Valdosta is in the Muskogee Creek kind of neck of the woods, so a lot of historians down there were more familiar with other native sovereign nations, and but nevertheless, the conversations we had were really fruitful, and it was encouraging for the students to learn that they could actually go to grad school and study this and continue learning and continue working on these topics. Then, more close to home, about a month later, we were able to present these papers again to a audience of Reinhardt students in an event called the Reinhardt University Convocation of Artists and Scholars. And that gave our student interns a chance to share their work with their peers, their teachers, their friends. So it was a really fruitful project, and it was basically all of us together using the primary sources of the claims that we had been transcribing to contextualize, to interpret, and to bring to light these claims in a more wider audience and amongst more scholars of the native South. So those were kind of the major research outcomes thus far for the project. Let's see. So one thing I wanted to give y'all, especially having the designation of course, the Going Snake District Historical Society, is I wanted to give y'all a couple examples of claims that I and the interns have just actually finished working on from Going Snake District. Many of y'all have probably seen both of these claims. Mary Bell, I'm sure, have seen them hundreds of times. But these are two claims that are kind of indicative of the kind of things that we discuss in our papers, in our historical analysis and interpretation. The first claim on the left is to Uwi Tuyahi, late of Sixestown. Sixestown, as most of y'all know, is in Georgia. It's in Hickory Log District, and it's right around modern day Ackworth. Sixestown, unfortunately, what could have been a rich archaeological site was flooded by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to make Lake Allatoona in the 1950s. So Sixestown is actually underwater, but it was at the confluence of the Etowah and the Little Rivers. So this is the claim of Ua Tuyuhi of Sixestown. It says he's removed in Moses Daniels Detachment, 1838, now resides in Going Snake District. He's claiming, of course, some livestock, cows and calves, hogs, as well as household goods, earthenware, pewter dishes, tinware, wheels and looms. So the wheels and looms tell us about the textile industry, the kind of cottage industry going on amongst the Cherokee people in the Eastern Nation prior to removal. Camille McKinney, the intern who focused on Cherokee life, she actually herself is really interested in weaving and kind of knitting. So she really took to this topic of historical textiles amongst the Cherokee like a fish to water, and did a lot of really interesting work on the Cherokee textiles. And then, of course, a feather bed and two pairs of scissors. So this claim, again, is more indicative of a typical claim, right? Something that shows a few livestock, and then perhaps some household goods. And then this category of dispossession, to use the categories that Christopher used, is property forced to abandon. So when the troops arrested, rounded up the folks in Sixestown and marched them to the first holding camp on the way to Ross's Landing, that's the way in which Uwo Tuyohi was dispossessed of their goods. The other claim, claim 288, is a more detailed claim, and one that involves more kind of historically significant aspects of Cherokee Nation history. This is to Jane Wright, late of Hickory Log, Cherokee Nation East, removed in 1832 under the direction of Major B.F. Curry, U.S. agent, now resides in Going Snake District. So she was an old settler. She went prior to the removal in the 1838-39 period. And as you can see in her claims, she's claiming things from three separate years. The first thing she claims, excuse me, in 1822 is for an enslaved man, worth, according to her, $900. Then 6 years later, horses and cattle. And then 2 years after that, 17 head of cattle. In her description of the way in which she was dispossessed, we see a number of really interesting things. And I'm going to go ahead and just read this for us in its entirety. Jane Wright, being duly sworn, states that in the year 1822, the United States troops came to my house and forcibly took 6 Negroes out of my possession and carried them to Milledgeville, Georgia. Milledgeville, as most of you all know, at that time is the capital of Georgia. And I got a white man named McConnell. This white man named McConnell was almost certainly Eli McConnell. Eli McConnell is a local Georgia figure who's going to play a prominent role during dispossession and even afterward. I got a white man named McConnell to go and get my Negroes for me, which he did. And I was to give him the sum of $200. And he brought the Negroes back. He kept one, the above charged, and would not let me have him. His name was Tom, and worth what I have charged for him. And this 6 head of horses was stolen from me by Sitten. When I'm doing a transcription for a claim, if the name is unclear, if the writing leads me to believe there could be variant spellings, then at the end, I put a question mark in parentheses, just to let the reader know that this name is not 100% what it probably was in the original authorship. So that's why there's a question mark there. Stolen from me by Sitten, a white man, in 1828, and this 16 head of horses and 14 head of cattle was stolen from me by James West, John West, R. Baker, W. Baker, and John Humphreys, all white men, and belonged to the Pony Club. The Pony Club, again, as most of us probably are aware from previous talks on the claims, was a notorious band of horse thieves based out of Carroll County, Georgia, who swept into Cherokee Nation, especially during the 20s, but even in the early 30s, and stole what probably amounts to conservatively hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars worth of Cherokee property in current inflated prices. The black mare was stolen from me by Fairchilds in the same year, and the 7 head of cattle was stolen from me in 1830 by William Hurd and John Cochran. I did not see either of the above persons have my property in the possession, but the Negro man was taken by McConnell. I saw him have said Negro man. And then, of course, the way they always end in this kind of legal official language, sworn and subscribed before me this 13th May, 1842, Ignatius A. Few, clerk, Jane Wright, her mark. So this claim is indicative of the claims that provide more information that allow us to do a more robust interpretation and tell the stories of the Cherokee people who were dispossessed in greater detail. It allows us to identify the perpetrators. In a lot of cases, the people who were stealing cattle, who were stealing goods, who were stealing houses from the Cherokee people in Hickory Log, ended up becoming, if not prominent citizens, at least notable people who we can follow through census records and through property exchanges in Georgia from the 1840s, 50s, 60s, and onward. So again, just 2 examples of the kind of claims we're working with, the kind of way we're transcribing them, and the kind of the results, the ways that we can use the information, the data from the claims to learn more about the Cherokee Nation East, the individuals and the communities. To kind of wrap it up, kind of hitting my 30-minute mark here, a few things as far as looking ahead. Number one, we're gonna finish the project. The grant runs through the end of May, but I'm probably gonna keep working on it into June a little bit. I've got about a month and a half before my classes start up again in the fall for teaching. So I'm gonna keep working on this. We have a student intern, Christopher, one of the 3 interns, has been hired full-time by Jeff Bishop. He and Jeff are gonna keep working through June as well. So we're gonna finish the project. We're going to make sure that the 38 claims are fully transcribed and digitized, and the 42 claims are also fully transcribed and on their way towards digitization. Another possible thing looking forward are future grants and future research. Jeff and the research folks at Reinhardt are also continuing to apply for grants to get more money, to hire more interns, to do more transcriptions. Ideally, at the end of the day, in 2, 3, 5 years, every single claim that we have access to could be transcribed and digitized upwards of 5,000. So that's the end goal. Looking ahead would be to get the financial resources and the people power to make that happen. Looking ahead to scholarship and genealogy. Again, going back to the goals, our goals are to allow these resources, these primary sources from the Hickory Log District and beyond, to give scholars of the Native South, scholars of the Cherokee Nation East, more resources to tell the accurate story of the removal era. There's an example, there's a woman at Florida State University doing her PhD with Andy Frank, and she's studying Cherokee gold mining, right? So these Hickory Log District claims are, or could be for her, an extremely valuable primary source that enables her to accurately tell that story about what happened in and around Dahlonega with Cherokee gold mining. And then, of course, genealogy. Our goal, our desire is for the descendants in Oklahoma and beyond to use the transcriptions to learn more easily about their ancestors without having to kind of go through the process of learning to read the 19th century longhand script. Finally, a little kind of vote of thanks on my own for myself. Obviously, a thanks to the National Endowment for the Humanities for funding the project, the Cherokee Voices Project. Thanks to Reinhardt University, my employer, for allowing us to do this. The National Trail of Tears Association for supporting us throughout the process. Jeff Bishop, of course, who's kind of the behind the scenes of all of this. Mike Wren, the kind of the Yoda for all claims. And Jack Baker for being so involved and so helpful. Troy Wayne Poteet, who's also been involved and helpful. Mary Bell Chase, thank you so much for all the work you've done to kind of to make the claims accessible, to make the claims available, to publicize the claims as a primary source. To our interns, we couldn't have done it without them. And then to y'all, thank you so much for having me. Thank you for your interest in this topic. And thank you for the opportunity to meet with y'all via Zoom this morning and share a bit about the project.